Hi, you've reached a holiday edition of the Signal Watch. I'm your Yuletide host, Ryan Steens. For some holiday cheer, join me in our chorus of co-contributors as we give the gift of holiday movie discussion, talking films both nice and, less nice. We'll examine Christmassy artifacts of the 20th century, merrily explore the 21st, and try to put it all in peppermint perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this jolly. Ho, ho, ho. Now I have a Die Hard podcast too. It's not it though. Let me try again.
Get him off. It's terrible.
Ho, ho, ho. Now I have a Die Hard podcast.
You should have started by going, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. So we should have started with.
Well, you can do it. Go ahead.
Oh dear. Die Hard.
Die Hard. So I have been actively. So obviously, this is who with me today.
Simon Day. Hello. And can I jump in and say I just listened to the other day your Jingle All the Way podcast, and I spilled my tea with indignation when you said nobody else would do a crappy film for Christmas. Because I'm like, I watched a crappy film for Christmas. I watched like a very karate Christmas Miracle, which I would have never watched any other time. And then you said we're not doing it anymore. Do Die Hard.
Well, I don't know if that's exactly the sequence of events, but there's been a lot of confusion this year over what the theme is and what we're doing. I have actively been avoiding doing Die Hard for years. Every year, Christmas
I ask you if I can do Die Hard, and you say no.
Yeah. And the reason is, I mean, to be honest, like Die Hard is so in the zeitgeist. And I feel like starting in November, I was getting like all the is Die Hard a Christmas movie articles and all that. And I was like, it's overcovered. No one needs to hear, one more take on Die Hard. But this year
they do.
They're gonna hear it. I think the world is now ready for this podcast.
We have wonderful insights that nobody else has thought of.
Right.
Like I'll give you one off the top of my head.
Go for it.
Have you noticed all the villains in this wear designer leather jackets? That seems to be the code of clothing for henchmen in the first two Die Hard films. You see somebody with a designer leather jacket, they're very untrustworthy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We absolutely need to talk about that. I am excited because this is a Bonnie Bedelia double feature.
She's quite lovely. Her hair's massive. I think maybe I'm just getting older and further away from the 80s, but her hair was quite terrifying this time I watched it.
It's a hairstyle I remember in catalogs, but very rarely on actual humans.
John Bon Jovi, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of teasing. And the funny thing is, then it's not consistent from like scene to scene. Because they're like, how tall is it in this scene versus that scene? And it grows and shrinks based on humidity, I guess, probably in the studio.
Well, I've got two things to answer that. There's a scene towards the end of Die Hard where I don't know if they're trying to sex her up a bit, but Alan Rickman kind of pushes her down and her top kind of pops open and you kind of get some boobs. Like not whole boobs, just like cleavage, but like it's very sweaty cleavage for a couple of minutes.
Yes.
And then the other thing I thought of was, I couldn't spot it, but I remember reading an article about this years ago. I think it was actually Richard E. Grant's book, With Nails, when he was talking about when he did Hudson Hawk. The first thing was Bruce Willis took him to the premiere of this. And he said during Hudson Hawk, you weren't allowed to mention the fact that they painted Bruce Willis's bald patch black. So I was looking at his hair all the way through Die Hard 2.
Oh, wow.
It was a good job if they covered it up. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I didn't. I did not notice that. I am sure that was happening. They at the time had this like hair in a can that you could spray if you had thinning hair that would thicken it up, and they would advertise it every Saturday and Friday night when I was in. Because if you've listened to this podcast for the past few years, occasionally I'll mention like USA Up All Night and how it was like my entree into all kinds of cinema. And including, they showed like terrible movies, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and stuff. But during the commercial breaks, you're talking basic cable in like the late 80s, early 90s. And they would definitely be advertising things like the Flowbee and like spray on hair and all of that. But yes, Bonnie Bedelia does definitely get knocked down, and we can talk about that a little bit more. But she,
you got to be from a poor family if you can only afford hair in a can for dinner.
It was the weirdest product, man. There was so much stuff, and it was like such a relief. I think everyone felt when like Picard became acceptable.
No, he was probably the role model, actually.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He was the one who was. Everyone was like, okay, if you have a good scalp, you can get away with this.
And actually, while we're still on hair, before we start doing this properly, I would say one of the many failings of the latter Die Hard films, basically 4 and 5, is it's more Bruce Willis than John McClane, because you got like Bruce Willis there with his shaved head and his designer leather jacket, which he obviously was jealous of from the first films, when the henchmen wore them. And his tight jeans. And you're like, well, it's kind of more Bruce Willis. John McClane wouldn't be like that. John McClane would have, in his latter years, a bad comb over and be more like Bruce Willis's character from 16 Blocks, where he's like probably got a paunch and a comb over and crappy clothes. So, so I think it's a bit like James Bond has become more Daniel Craig than James Bond last couple of films. I feel like Die Hard was just like, Bruce Willis has just turned up wearing his clothes, and just film him.
I have actually a lot of comments about that, even between the first 2 movies. But we are doing Die Hard 1 and 2. Like I said, I've been avoiding these, and you are not the only one who's asked to do Die Hard. I think some of the other co-contributors have, and I
bet I asked the most, though.
Yes, well, I mean, every 48 hours is a lot, but I figured we should probably do that.
Shut him up.
But the thing is, I actually love Die Hard. And part of
you and I have seen Die Hard together with Jamie.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, a kind of brief history for me. I guess I must have seen this on TV, early 90s when I was a teenager or early 20s. Because I remember being excited for when Die Hard with a Vengeance came out. So I must have seen Die Hard before then.
Okay. Die Hard with a Vengeance was like 95. Right around winter. Yeah. So I was going to say my sophomore year of college.
Yeah, I was about 22, I think. So I saw Die Hard on TV, but I never owned it. I never had it like Aliens or The Fly or, any of those other movies that I kind of ran out and bought on video. For some reason, it was never that important, but it's become more important over the years. And I remember like the first time I saw it, that the point where it switched from being a good action movie to a great movie is the scene where Alan Rickman pretends to be a hostage.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, that is brilliant, because you expect him to either go, aha, you've caught me, Mr. McClane, or you expect him to go, get hold of a weapon or something and go, I've gotten you now, Mr. McClane, like a Bond villain. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't either. He's basically kind of like, just pretends to be this other person. And you're like, and that scene, I wish that scene could go on longer, because that's so good, the dynamic of it. And anyway, after that, I guess I went to college. I remember going down to this very seedy, quite scary basement in Sheffield that sold secondhand video cassettes. and buying the widescreen copies of Die Hard, Die Hard 2, and Die Hard 3. And that was back when, DVDs were just starting, and getting a widescreen version of anything was still quite rare and exotic. And that's pretty much when I started watching these every year in about 2000. And then, of course, when I moved over here, rather than just sitting home watching a video, the Alamo pretty much showed it every year. And I've been to Quote-alongs, Prop-alongs, Master Pancake laughs at it, Pyrotechnics, Die Hard versions. I even went to, when Part 5 came out in 2013, I took a day off work because weirdly they did it as a kind of Valentine's thing, but it was like on a Wednesday or something, very close to Valentine's or on Valentine's Day, which I guess they were a bit desperate by this point, but they were promoting as a Valentine's movie, which is absolutely makes no sense whatsoever. But they showed all 5 Die Hards in a marathon.
Oh God, yeah. Nothing says I love you like 10 hours of Die Hard.
Well, my girlfriend at the time, bless her, went with me. Bless her heart.
Yeah.
But it was kind of sad. Well, it was surreal watching Christmas movies in February, but it also was sad watching the slow and then faster decline throughout the day in quality. They should have started with a new film and gone backwards, like they did when we saw Robocop.
Yes, completely agree. I saw this in the theater, Die Hard 1 and Die Hard 2 in the theater upon release.
You must be quite young, fairly young.
Yes, but I had a dad who desperately wanted to see things like this. And, I'm taking the boy. And I very much remember it because it was out in Austin at the same time as The Last Temptation of Christ.
Okay.
And we drove past, it was the Village was showing Last Temptation of Christ, and we saw this at North Cross Mall, which is across the street.
Yeah.
And
demonstrators?
Yeah, there were. And I saw people I knew and I waved to them and they were like, "Are you coming to protest?" I was like, "No, we're going to see Die Hard," and like waved to them as we drove by. And then before it, for some reason, and looking back only now, like as an adult, do I think I kind of get what was going on. They showed a Bugs Bunny before they showed Die Hard. That's
kind of weird. Well, yeah. It's kind of, I guess Die Hard 2 onwards, it kind of makes sense because it is a bit Looney Tunes.
Dude, I think that's actually the mistake between Die Hard 1 and Die Hard 2. Die Hard 1 still has satire baked in.
Yeah.
John McClane doesn't know what he's doing from minute to minute.
No, not at all.
He's just complete, and that was the fun thing about it. He's improvising. He's doing things that it's like, well, I'm going to die this way, so I might as well tie myself to a fire hose and jump off the building. Because you saw that in the trailer, and you were like, what would lead to this?
Why would you do that?
Yeah. And
well, it's basically like the old Jaws 2 thing. Die Hard 2 is pretty much the same film made by lesser filmmakers.
Yeah, made by Rennie Harlin.
And I'm not knocking Rennie Harlin because I
will. I saw that pirate movie.
Yeah, Cliffhanger. I know you don't like Cliffhanger, but
but he did the Cutthroat Island as well.
Yeah,
he has left a trail of very bad movies behind him,
But he's also done The Long Kiss Goodnight, which you enjoyed.
Yeah, that's true. Davis. That's true. Was that Rennie Harlin?
That was Rennie Harlin. So there is. There is good stuff there, but it's like, I know exactly what you mean. It's like and we can talk about this later. We can start talking about Die Hard and then talk about the shift into Die Hard 2.
Yeah.
But it's like everything's a bit off in Die Hard 2, really.
So Die Hard is a movie about Bonnie Bedelia.
Well, let's get the big elephant out of the room. I know you want to talk about Bonnie Bedelia. we can't do that for 2 hours.
Damn it. Where's my Christmas gift?
Well, the big elephant in the room, yes, it is a Christmas movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I agree.
Bruce Willis is a grumpy old bastard who probably says, up is down and black is white these days, just to piss people off. But just to see the reactions on small children's faces as they crumple into tears. But no, so my frame of reference is this. Lethal Weapon came out, the first Lethal Weapon, also a great action movie, came out about the same time as Die Hard. Both of them were set at Christmas. In fact, in Lethal Weapon, I think we first meet Mel Gibson when he's having a shootout in a Christmas tree kind of sale place, and he's running around them. And then, of course, the end of that, he has the fight with Gary Busey on the lawn with all the Christmas lights behind. But in Lethal Weapon, Christmas is a backdrop. It has no impact on the plot. Now, Die Hard, if there was no Christmas party, none of this would have happened. So it is a Christmas movie. That's my argument.
So I initially, I saw this movie in the summer. That's when it came out, or during the spring.
Which is weird because we got your Christmas movies at the right time because we got them 6 months after you.
Yeah, I don't know, it wasn't, and I think Lethal Weapon was released in the summer as well.
Probably because the biggest market.
But I was just kind of used to it. You'd go to a movie, sometimes it took place at Christmas, but you'd walk out into the Austin or Houston heat, and it would be 95 degrees out. But
still Christmas as well.
That's absolutely true. But I think part of it has been doing this podcast year in and year out and kind of like grabbing at different themes, like we did movies that take place at Christmas but have nothing to do with Christmas.
Yeah.
In the kind of like based on the criteria we use there, everything you said, I agree with. I think what I have kind of also come to terms with is it doesn't need to be. I'm currently, by the way, halfway through the Nativity Story, the Oscar Isaac movie from like 15 years ago, where it's literally Mary and Joseph. That's a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be that to be a Christmas movie. And no. There's enough stuff baked into what's going on. The soundtrack is Christmas carols. Full stop.
Yeah.
So I do think it goes beyond just taking place at Christmas.
Well, to be honest, Lethal Weapon had Jingle Bell Rock at the start, but I still say Christmas is just the background in Lethal Weapon. It could take place at any time and it wouldn't change the plot.
Yeah. It does also have Darlene Love in it as the wife. So that gives it double Christmas points.
Well done, because I thought that this morning and I forgot it. So well done for getting that.
If Darlene Love just like walks around like drifting Christmas behind her. But anyway, I think I do think it's a Christmas movie in the same way, frankly, that a lot of Hallmark movies are Christmas movies. Like they take place at Christmas. Everything happens because of Christmas.
Yeah.
And people talk about Christmas. Is it actually about Christmas? I don't know. But it's this one, as you said, happens to take place entirely because the rest of the building's cleared out because of the holiday.
Yeah.
There's no construction workers are gone, which is nonsense, just like a Hallmark movie where there's actual business occurring on Christmas Eve. Like the whole planet shuts down on Christmas. Like America kind of makes that happen.
Yeah. But also in Die Hard 2, I can't remember in the film or the trailer, but at some point Bruce Willis goes, the same thing happened to me this time last year. And then I was reading the synopsis of Die Hard 2, and I think the synopsis is actually wrong on Wikipedia, but they were like, 2 years ago, this happened to John McClane. I'm like, I think it's supposed to be the next year. I think it's literally that close together.
I mean, chronologically, them coming out, it was not year after year. So
it was 2 years for films, but I think it's supposed to be a year in the timeline. I think
I have no idea, but the anyway, yeah. I mean, I'll go in with folks who say it's a Christmas movie, and it's kind of, if nothing else, become one.
It's been embraced.
Yeah, it's something, and everyone watches different movies at Christmas. That's one of the things we've really talked about year out on here.
Yeah,
and just because maybe I would prefer to watch White Christmas or whatever on Christmas versus Die Hard. I also totally respect. Like I went to Target and there's like piles of Gremlins on DVD sitting out, like because they know there's going to be people looking for it for Christmas. So
I literally have been to see Love Actually this morning, and of course because of this podcast, I've done Die Hard very early and Die Hard 2. So I'm way ahead of schedule at this point with my Christmas viewing.
You'll have plenty of time to rewatch Karate Christmas. Is the good news.
As I'm tied to a chair, being tortured by a German terrorist. Yeah, well, so yeah, I mean, so Die Hard originally, so the big hoo-ha with Die Hard was Bruce Willis got paid $5 million, which at the time was kind of what the top stars were getting, and that caused huge controversy. Plus the fact that back then, unlike now, TV actors weren't seen to be able to cross over to movies. You know, people tried it like Shelley Long and Bill Cosby, and just hadn't made it. So it was like, what's this TV actor getting paid so much for to be in this movie? And I know as it went along, originally, you know, he got booed in trailers originally, and they actually took him off the posters. So the posters change. You know, the early posters have his face on, then it goes to just the building, and then they put his face back on, because when they started doing the previews, it started getting really, really good word of mouth. So then they kind of started pushing him a bit more, but they really kept him in the background for a while as the star.
I mean, I don't really remember a whole lot of that. My memory, because I was like 12 or something when this came out, and
yeah,
the my memory was really the roof exploding and him jumping off, and me kind of going, I don't know what this movie is. What I really remember it for was, and I think we've talked about this maybe in a Schwarzenegger movie podcast or something, but this was the kind of cut to the everyman action hero.
Well, this was ground zero for that, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, nothing was the same after this movie.
And to be honest, watching it the other night, I was, especially the first, talking about the first film, because I think as the Die Hard series goes on, I think even by the end of Die Hard with a Vengeance, when him and Samuel Jackson jump onto the tanker, you're like, they'd both be dead. You know, and by part 4, he's tap dancing on the wall of the wing of a jet while it's spinning around. It's like, yeah. But I think in the first Die Hard film, I was very impressed how his character, they keep giving him obstacles. They keep giving him vulnerabilities. Like, you know, literally the first scene is he's scared of flying. And then he's trying to get back with his wife, and he messes that up, you know, because he kind of loses his temper. Then he gets separated from his shoes, and it just goes on and on and on. Whereas by contrast, they spend all the film setting up Alan Rickman as basically being a huge threat, because he knows he's got this fantastic plan. He obviously kills Takagi. You know, he doesn't just threaten him. He actually goes ahead and goes through with it, kills him. He knows exactly what the FBI is going to do. He knows exactly what the police are going to do. He's got it all nailed down. So, you know, both the arcs for both those characters are fantastic in setting the villain up and kind of like knocking the hero down. So you really root for him. It's almost like Rocky, you know?
I agree. I mean, I hadn't really thought about the Alan Rickman as the contrast, but yes, I mean, Rickman does have this plan. And versus everything having to be from, you know, McClane hearing the guns being fired in the lobby when he's balling his feet on the carpet, which he was told to do right by this guy on the plane.
Yeah.
Had that guy not said anything, who knows what would have happened? But
he'd have had some shoes.
He would have probably been in there having a cocktail and would have been stuck sitting with everybody, right? But he would have had shoes too. So, yeah, it's they really do a good job of making you go along on this journey of like, how difficult would this actually be? And some of it obviously is pure luck, like him trying to jump down the elevator shaft.
Oh yeah.
You know, stuff like that. But it's, and that's part of why it's almost cartoon like, right? But they do a really good job with the characterization and the direction of what's in the script. And this is where I think you get really the difference between Die Hard 1 and what Die Hard 2 ended up doing, where you could kind of see them already starting to drift away. But everything also makes sense. The entire thing's clockwork because they had to work out exactly what Alan Rickman's plan is. And then you have his people who all specifically have characters.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I've written down like Aliens. You actually, even the minor characters are interesting. I mean, you know, Rickman's fantastic, but his henchmen are all distinctive. You know, I love the little kind of Chinese guy who, when they're waiting for the police to kind of try to break in, he just kind of grabs the chocolate bar that he's next to and eats it out of the display. You know, And then, even the police, you've got some great character actors in there. Paul Gleason playing a dick again, and William Afton playing a dick again. These are all great. Everybody's distinctive and interesting, and you could kind of branch off and do a film about any of these. Which sadly by Die Hard 5, not even the villain's interesting. All Die Hard 5's got is Bruce Willis not really bothering to be McClane anymore. He's just wandering through the film. But compare that to the limo driver in this, can't remember his name, and Argyle, and and obviously Al, and there's so many great characters.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that I think is really the success of this is like it's the merging of this kind of crazy action that doesn't really it's a bunch of nonsense, but they end up grounding it with all of these kind of satirical characters that are around Al and John and Bonnie Bedelia. But it's you have Atherton playing Atherton to the hilt, who is so good in this, and Paul Gleason, who just has line after line that's absolute gold.
And he actually, some of these guys change as well. Like Rickman isn't just a straight down the line evil git. I mean, he listens to kind of like Holly when she says, we've got a pregnant woman, we need the bathroom, and he's like, that's a good point. Fair enough. I'll bring a sofa out so she can lie in that. He's not a monster or one dimensional.
I think he's going to blow up that pregnant lady, but he's at least smart enough to know that what he has to do in order to keep his plan going. And I appreciate that they thought so hard about what Hans Gruber was actually like. I don't know anything about the groups he came out of, but you get this idea of he made this jump from being this maybe super leftist terrorist to suddenly he's like, oh, by the way, I've discovered commerce and I've read Forbes and I read Time and I'm trying to basically become a yuppie overnight by just using all these skills I learned as a terrorist to, accumulate wealth. I learned about bearer. I mean, I remember walking out of the movie and turning to my dad and going, what's a bearer bond? And having to explain it's like, they don't really use those anymore like that, kid, but it works for the movie.
It's also like, even like Gleason, he's kind of like, he's obviously like a minor antagonist. But then, when the FBI guys get blown up and the chopper gets blown up, even he's like, well, actually, even before that, he turns to like Al and kind of goes, oh, got a bad feeling about this. And it's like, you can kind of see him like going, I know these guys are in charge, but I don't think this is going to work. And I'm not too happy about it. So,
it's funny because he's playing. I don't know if that stereotype is still around, but he's definitely playing like what in the 80s was considered like the American dumb, like basically the Peter Principle level of like this guy has been elevated to the point where he's incompetent. Yeah, they haven't demoted him yet, but he's in charge on Christmas, and it's like it's the same thing. And it was kind of how people thought of government workers, especially back in the 80s. Yeah, and Al's of course the Twinkie buying cop when you meet him. It's only through him talking to John over the radio that you get kind of the characterization.
Well, Al's also got a great redemptive arc, which always gets me kind of teared up a bit at the end because it's like, in doing that, he kind of like, he absolves his own problems or his own ghosts, I guess. He pulls his gun again to protect his friend.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one to have aged into the era of cops do shoot kids, and it makes the press now in a way that it did not back in the 80s. Yeah. And it's of course, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but it definitely, I do agree that narratively that storyline absolutely works.
The Cole popping up, I think, is kind of ridiculous because, at that point, he'd probably just slink off if he was still alive. He wouldn't go from under a blanket.
I will tell you, I remember that I remember so many of these scenes happening in the theater the first time I saw it. And when it did, it got an audible reaction when he popped out because we thought the movie was over.
Yeah.
Like at this point,
Cameron tease, isn't it?
Yeah, we all thought we were getting the big hug, at the end between John and Al, and the next thing you know, it's
And I guess he killed his brother, so maybe he would be that pissed off.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Did you notice that one of the baddies is Vigo from Ghostbusters 2?
No, I didn't, but I know exactly the one you're talking about because he's the one that I was going to say he's got a leather jacket. That doesn't narrow it down. He's got a leather jacket and a ponytail. He's the one that goes into the room where the couple are trying to have sex, and John escapes right at the start.
Yeah, he's there, and he dies early in the film when John drops the C4 down the elevator shaft.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's really interesting that you said that. Yeah, because I was like, he kind of looks familiar, but I didn't know where from.
Yeah, without his Vigo outfit and being stuck in a painting, it's hard to know who he is. But yeah, there was like
Bill Murray said, his camp stance of his hands on his hips.
There's an article somewhere, I'll link to it in the SoundCloud, about that guy, and it's fascinating. He was an absolute wild card in real life. But
there's also, I'll tell you who is brilliant in this as well. And his performance actually kind of pissed off John McTiernan, the director, who wanted him to play more like Cary Grant. But then once he saw the reaction of the producers who were like laughing and saying it was great, he kind of said, well, I was wrong. You carry on doing what you're doing. Is actually Hart Bochner, I think, as Ellis.
Yeah.
Who's, he actually makes me laugh a couple of times in this. And he's also got a very kind of sad death because he's totally out of his depth. And even John's like, shut up. I don't know this guy. Stop talking. You don't know how dangerous these people are. And he's like, well, what do you mean, John? And this kind of stuff. But I love the scene where Alan Rickman's basically trying to find Takagi. And he's kind of like going down the road. And he kind of goes face to face with Ellis. And then his face, he just panics. And then later on, he's like kind of going, oh, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, to himself. It's just such a great performance, the whole thing.
Yeah, it's. I thought, honestly, you'd see that guy a lot more after this movie.
It's the same kind of performance as in True Romance. The guy who tries to hook up the drug supply with Christian Slater.
Mm-hmm.
And then the police use him. They wire him up. It's just very similar where it's a great little kind of scene for an actor.
Well, the thing that was so interesting about the Ellis stuff, kind of, the guy's performance definitely elevated it. But at the time when that movie came out, you expected that to work. That was how movies worked at the time. You expected Ellis to smooth talk his way through it. I mean, that was kind of like one of the things that would happen in a movie at the time. Like there was the 80s yuppie who would, he might have sold out John or whatever. And then John would have to get his revenge on him at the end of the movie somehow, flicking him in the forehead or, kicking him in the butt or whatever. But to see that and to realize how smart this movie was, which we're all very used to because we've seen it 20 times.
Yeah.
But the first time I saw that movie, I was like, oh, this guy's going to, try and sell out John and and I kind of was already 2 steps ahead of it in the theater. And then John starts going, shut up, Ellis. And I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And it's impossible to go back because now that scene's been imitated and we kind of expect the subtext of what's going on to be part of scenes like that.
We've had so many guys or heroes in the group go, don't worry, I'll go and talk to him.
Yeah.
Or I'll go and sort this out. And then they're the first ones killed off, leaving maybe the weaker members or the less capable members.
Yeah. I mean, it's anyway, I still think that scene is great on so many levels, not just the performance by Rickman and that guy and then John over the radio, but it just was just really well written and part of how smart everyone who worked on that movie was. And I think that is kind of the gap you get between Die Hard 1 and Die Hard 2, where everything in Die Hard 2, when they have a twist, you're like, oh, okay.
Also the twists are kind of obvious in Die Hard 2, like them using the different ammunition, the blue tape and the red tape, and it's like, you kind of know that before the characters do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like, something's wrong here because he
definitely. Why are they showing them changing their ammunition out from red to blue? Yeah, it's.
And why didn't they hit him when he's riding right towards them? Well, yeah. So Die Hard was based on a book, a 1979 novel called Nothing Lasts Forever, which was actually about a retired policeman in his 60s, who I think had a job as a security officer in a skyscraper. And, some differences. A lot of characters made it through both versions, but I think the villains kidnap his daughter and wife to make him do the robbery or help them with the robbery, and he's got to try to rescue them while he's in the building. And some characters weren't in it. I don't think Thornburg was in the book. But funnily, there was a film version of the same character was in another film called The Detective, played by Frank Sinatra.
Oh, okay.
So what happened was when they were developing Die Hard, they were obliged to offer it to Frank Sinatra first. And of course he was quite wisely, he said, "I'm 70. I'm not doing that." But this was offered to all the big actors at the time, and they all kind of turned it down. I think even Stallone and Schwarzenegger might have been offered it, which is interesting because it kind of takes us back to our point of, I think the reason this resonates so much with our generation, especially, is even though we'd probably get killed straight away, we can see ourselves in this role a lot easier than we can in Rocky or Conan or whatever. Because this is a normal guy. This is a normal guy doing his best, quite often messing up. He fails to stop the guy getting shot. He fails to stop Ellis getting shot. He messes up a lot, but he just keeps trying.
Yeah, and there's a million ways things don't go quite right. Even when he runs up to the roof and he's looking for Holly, and all the other people are up there.
Yeah,
and he's like, "Where's Holly?" and no one will listen to him.
Yeah, because they all think they're going to get rescued.
Yeah, they think this is the end of it, and then this crazy guy's run up here with a machine gun and he's screaming at us, and we don't know him. He must be part of the gang we haven't seen before.
And I love all the triple crosses going on, because you've got the FBI going, "We're going to lose some hostages, but we've got these airship guns. Mm-hmm. We're going to kill all the terrorists." And then you got Alan Rickman going, "Ha ha ha! I'm going to blow up the roof and blow up the helicopters." Everybody's got their own agenda, and it's all kind of coming together at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really damn smart script. And I don't know a ton about McTiernan, but everything I've ever seen him do kind of has this extra layer of, this was smart. This was smarter than it needed to be. This was not I mean, God knows I love Commando. But Commando ends with the dude picking up, an M60 and just walking through the middle of someone's backyard, killing people. This isn't that. This is if John McClane did that, he'd be dead.
Yeah. And even the end, it's a great ending. With the kind of the gun taped to the back, and and I love how Rickman still tries to take her with him. Mm-hmm. Briefly, he's like, "I'm going to take you with me," and then I guess gravity takes over. And that scene's, the story for that scene is, of course, John McTiernan said, "We're going to drop you, Alan Rickman, onto an airbag from 70 feet." But he didn't tell him when. So he said, "We're going to count to 3." And I think he just released it without counting to 3. So that's a real look on Alan Rickman's face of, "I didn't expect this to be happening."
Oh man, poor Rickman. But this was the first time anyone had seen him. We knew Bruce Willis from Moonlighting, which was absolutely huge in the States at the time.
Yeah.
And I
think the only reason he could make this is because Sybil Shepherd, I think he got offered it and said he couldn't do it because of the time frame. But then straight after he said he couldn't do it, Sybil Shepherd got pregnant.
I remember that.
Moonlighting for 11 weeks. So he was like, "Now I can do it."
I didn't realize that. I remember her being pregnant though. And of course it was the first time you saw oh my God, Van Johnson. What's his first name?
Reginald.
Yeah. First time anyone saw him, and then he became a TV dad for like 10 years on Family Matters.
And so we never got Family Matters. So I always felt a bit sad because I only ever saw him pop up in his cameo in Die Hard 2. And I was like, well, at least he probably got paid well for a day's work. But I never saw him again after that.
Family Matters is very not good.
Was he the chauffeur in Crocodile Dundee as well? Was he?
I think he might have been
in the first one where he takes the boomerang off the back and throws it.
I remember him popping up in another, or realizing that was him in another movie, and I think that might have been it. So,
yeah.
And he pops up as a cop here and there. He's always a cop, like, you know, just like releasing main characters from jail, you know, sort of thing. But yeah, so he ended up as this TV dad on this like really hokey sitcom called. It was basically Friday night on one of the channels. I think it was ABC, was TGIF, and thank God it's Friday, and it was basically TV to watch with your elementary school age children.
Yeah,
when they get home, and it really became famous for the character of Urkel, Steve Urkel, who was the next door neighbor, who was like, "Did I do that?"
Sounds like Ned Flanders.
Well, he was like a little kid who was a genius, who was constantly like, he was Dennis the Menace to kind of Reginald VelJohnson's kind of Mr. Wilson. It was constantly annoying him, and he was supposedly
sounds like rubbish.
It was, yeah. I mean, but it was also one of the first, like not one of the first, but one of the biggest long running black sitcoms to. I mean, it was years and years and years. It was on Jaleel White, who had played Steve Urkel, went from being like a little kid to being like a college aged guy by the time the movie or the show was done with its course. So
yeah.
Hopefully everyone has plenty of money off of residuals and all that from that show.
I'm sure that set him off for life. I'm sure after that he didn't have to work again.
No, I don't think he had to. I think he could go chill and do whatever he wanted.
Charlie Sheen. People feel sorry for Charlie Sheen, but I'm sure he's like got millions and millions of dollars.
Oh my God. He has made so many good deals for having to do so little work. Never feel sorry for Charlie Sheen. But yeah, I just think it really changed things. And then of course you expected Die Hard 2 to come.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say.
Oh yeah. Well, so Jan de Bont had been, you know, this I think is what ended up getting him the director's seat in Speed.
Which is ironically Die Hard on a Bus.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. and mistakenly led people to believe he could direct a movie for many years after that.
I like Speed, but it does feel like one flash of lightning, sadly, in a career.
Well,
it feels like maybe you couldn't have screwed up that concept because it's a very good concept.
Well, and then you cast Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock at like, you know, both of them at, you know,
shoot as a person.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I haven't watched Speed in 20 years, but yeah. And Jeff Daniels is your supporting character. I mean, it's kind of hard to screw all of this up.
But sorry, I interrupted you.
But yeah, he would then go on to direct The Haunting and prove to everybody he had no idea what he was doing running a movie. But I think
he finally petered out, didn't he? Because I remember having one particularly crap summer where there was a bunch of terrible sequels coming out, and one of them was Speed 2, which I didn't even bother going to see. I was like, the trailer's enough to put me off that. Really, it's like
billions of people stayed away from that.
Yeah.
My brother saw it because he liked Jason Patrick, so he was like, "Yeah, I'll go check it out." And he was nonplussed, I guess is the way I'd put it when he returned. But
we also talk about people behind the camera. We've also got Michael Kamen, who fantastic score utilizing "Ode to Joy," which one of my favorite scenes is when the vault finally does open, and you just see Rickman's face bathed in the lights.
Kid on Christmas. Yeah.
So good. But like Lethal Weapon, you know, he managed, because he did the Lethal Weapon films as well. But he manages to do like, and again, this is why I'd argue it's a Christmas film. I feel like Lethal Weapon is like, you know, a huge amount of saxophone going on, but But like Die Hard is kind of sinister jingle bells. So I think it is positioned more as a Christmas kind of music, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was really listening to the score this time when we were watching it. And I was like, well, when you integrate in Christmas music into every sting, you know, and into every beat, they know what they're doing here. So,
yeah. So you know, trying to think what else we could talk about actually. Well, I love the editing. I know the editing purposely DeBont did a lot of handheld stuff, and I love, like, you know, early on the cutting between John and Holly, kind of, you know, getting to know each other again, and the truck just slowly getting close to the building. I mean, it's just such a good build up, you know, and you don't have that in action films anymore. They have to hit you over the head straight away these days. But, you know, there's a good 40 minutes here, 30, 40 minutes before anything really happens.
Is it really?
I think so. So, yeah.
Okay.
Because he gets off the plane and then, you know, he gets the limo ride and...
Yeah, you get all the setup talking to Argyle, and then he and Holly have to have a little blowout, and then...
Yeah. And it's funny now how he goes, like, you know, have you got any proper Christmas music?
Oh, my God. I just realized her name is Holly.
Yeah, I thought that the other day. Okay. I don't know if that's on purpose, but
it's gotta be.
But yeah, I love how they go like Run DMC and he goes, "Oh, this is rubbish. Have you got any old classical music?" I'm like, that is classical Christmas music now. We've been alive too long. And this isn't flawless. You know, there's a very dodgy wig for Carl's brother when he slides down the banisters on the stuntman. That's a bad wig. There's also the fact that Rickman can't tell that the gun's empty when John hands it to him, which I don't think would be true. I think he'd be able to tell that. But, you know, all in all, this is like fantastically made, really, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I consider it to be hyper realism. I mean, it's got a flavor of realism through all the characterization. Of course, Ellis is, you know, a little over the top, and having these kind of Euro trash thieves is, you know, a little over the top. I mean, but, you know, you're also peeling away all these layers. Like when you see this movie the first time, you don't know those guys are thieves. You believe they are terrorists.
Yeah.
Along with everybody else for the first, 2/3 of the movie.
And I love how Rickman plays on that, where he goes, you know, you need to release like Pakistani Storm group and stuff. And like Carl's like, what are you talking about? He goes, I just read about them in Time magazine. And he goes, well, what if they try to get hold of them? He goes, who cares? It's like, you know, we'll be gone by then.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I just think that, you know, it's so smart. And then you get to Die Hard 2 and it's, you know,
my brain hurts watching Die Hard 2.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can't even figure out in the first part of it. Oh God, I've forgotten the name of the actor who plays the main bad guy in Die Hard.
Oh, William Sadler?
Yeah, William Sadler. Why they're even in the airport at the beginning?
Because he has to do his nude Tai Chi in his room to show off the fact that he's been doing weights.
There's literally not a reason for any of them to be in the airport when John sees all of them being shady.
Well, yeah, because they could have gone straight to the base, like that old church.
Yeah.
And just gone from there.
There's not a reason in the world for them to actually be in the airport.
Well, the two initial guys are putting that thing in the luggage, aren't they? The beeper or the tracker or whatever, because that's what he catches them doing.
But why are they doing that?
It's, I don't know, something to mess up the signal or something, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, but they don't need to put it into luggage. They don't need. I mean.
Well, let's tell you what. Before we get into this too deep, okay. let's switch over to Die Hard 2.
Okay.
So just two more things I was going to say about Die Hard before we finish.
Okay.
It was originally sold as Rambo in a Skyscraper, which is funny when you think that, like we were saying, this goes almost like as an anti-Rambo.
Yeah.
And also, you know, the screenwriter said he kind of wrote it as if Rickman was the protagonist, and it was from his point of view, which I think is why his character is so rounded, because it's almost like, you know, this is my plan. Watch this guy turning up. It's almost like, the Karate Kid thing of like, from Johnny's point of view, this new kid comes into town, steals his girlfriend, is the enemy, the villain. So, I thought that was interesting.
And that's why I thought, by the way, it was a Bugs Bunny cartoon.
Yeah.
Because it's the same setup as all Bugs Bunny things, right? It's Yosemite Sam or Elmer Fudd shows up where Bugs is just doing his thing.
Yeah.
And there now it's Bugs is going to make life hell for Yosemite Sam, who's trying to change things. And that's why I think now that it's actually a perfect combo to watch a little Bugs before you watch your Die Hard. So
I will try that next time. But sorry, we were talking about you started talking about Die Hard 2. So let's
Bonnie Bedelia is in an airplane in this one.
Die Hard 2 Die Harder.
Yes. Which even in 9th grade when I saw this, I thought was the stupidest title for a movie. It is. It's stupid. But yeah, I don't know if they were kidding with that to this day. I have no idea.
Nasty feeling they weren't.
Yeah. But the movie, this one just doesn't make any sense. Like the script is incredibly lazy and it's by some of the same guys.
It is the same. It's a lot of the same crew in front and behind the camera. And I remember you telling me ages ago, we were having a chat about Christmas films. And you telling me that your main problem with Die Hard 2 is the planes would just get diverted.
Yeah.
And so there wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. So there's a number of things like that in this movie. Like, let's start with the big shot that they used in the trailer was Bruce Willis being shot in an ejection seat out of this airplane.
So that's the point for me where the Die Hard films go silly. Because up until then, I can just about say, it's like Indiana Jones. I can go, okay, it's a long shot, but he could probably just about do this and survive this. But watching this again last night, they throw about 30 grenades, which all take 10 minutes to go off.
Yes, I counted. It's about 20 seconds.
Yeah.
The grenades to go off.
Into the cockpit.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he jumps in the chair and straps himself in. And not only does he eject and, big explosion, dodgy CGI, but it's like, but when he lands, he has a horrible line, which remind me of this because one of my failings of the Die Hard series, these two films, is some of Bruce Willis's lines make no sense, which is supposed to be funny. And when he lands in this, he goes something like, where's the fucking door? And I'm like, that's horrible. That's horrible. It's like, that's not funny. It's like, who turned out the lights?
that airplane doesn't have ejection seats. Full stop.
Yeah.
That plane, if you're leaving it, you jump out the door behind the prop. Yeah. You don't, there's no such thing as an ejection seat. If there was one, all he would have done was shoot his head into the ceiling of the airplane and been dead. It's just flat out. They show the plane before it explodes and there's nothing open on it. They don't even fake it to say, oh yeah, there was a hatch we didn't show you. That's not standard to this airplane or something.
Yeah. It kind of smells of they had the idea and then just when we'll get away with it.
Yeah. And at the time, when I was in 9th grade, I didn't get it. But I'm watching it with my dad later on VHS. And my dad's whole thing was like, he spent a hot 3 years in the military. So he's like, got to always point out anything that's wrong from airplanes from the 60s. Yeah. But he's like, well, that plane doesn't have ejection seats. I'm like, wait, what? And so we rewound it. And he's like, see, the roof on it's not open. There's no canopy to pop open like you would with a ejection seat. Right. So
we meet McClane again smoking in the airport yet again.
Yes.
It's the 80s.
Well, you think they're off on the right foot because they're doing the thing where they're towing his mother-in-law's car away.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's but I mean, straight away, I remember watching this and going, he's a bit more of an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
He's a bit more, he's a bit more Bruce Willis, basically.
I think he got his hands on the script and said, John is not going to be bumblefucking his way through this the way he did in the first movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's irresistible to women.
Oh, God.
The just the facts thing.
Well, and I noticed in the first one, the flight attendant is totally eye fucking him when he's coming off the plane.
With the bear, with the star.
Yeah. And in this one, every woman who walks past him is like, "Ooh, Bruce Willis." Which, fair enough, I guess. But if you're in charge of your own movie, why not do it?
Even the reporter she's told to fuck off. She's like, "I'll have your babies if you give me the story." And he's like, "Not the kind of ride I'm looking for."
Oh, that was so bad.
Bad one-liners.
Yeah. And she wasn't good. I don't know why they cast her. I don't know whose girlfriend she was.
I mean, I guess she's kind of trying to be the female Thornburg on the ground, and the whole setup seems to be to get to the helicopter at the end. To be honest,
yeah,
it's like they've got a helicopter. We're going to need it for the finale. That's about it, really.
Yeah, it's just not. Anyway, but yeah, so like we were saying at the beginning of this part. I saw this in whatever 8th or 9th grade, and my uncle who lives in DC was in town, and he's like, "Did you see the Die Hard 2?" And I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Did you like it?" And I was like, "Eh." Yeah. And he was like, "Well, there's like 3 airports in DC alone." I was like, "Wait, what?" He's like, I don't understand the premise of the movie." He's like, they if they have 90 minutes of fuel, you're on the East Coast. You could be anywhere you wanted to be, from Maine to like basically Atlanta within that amount of time. Like, there wasn't a reason. And they were like, "Oh, these planes are going to circle for 2 hours and start dropping out of the air." It's like, well, that's not how planes work. They don't just suddenly like run out of fuel and go into the ground. Like, that's so. And of course, there's contingencies for all of this stuff, or we wouldn't have the airline system that we have.
It's also very reliant on the weather being bad. And I'm like, that's, you're never really going to know if that's going to happen. I just feel like Die Hard 2, while it is very entertaining, I will say it is entertaining. It's like almost like somebody's watched Die Hard and kind of got the wrong messages from it.
Yeah.
Or so, at the start you have all the stuff about technology, because in the first one, there's the computer to find Holly's name when he first goes to Fox Plaza, which was the real Fox building being built, which they used in the movie. And I read, just a quick digress, I read when they have the tank in the first Die Hard come up, the personnel carrier, and knock down the railing, they never replaced that railing on the real Fox Plaza. Yeah, because they just built it, and they were like, "Screw you then. You just knock down our railing." But in this one, it's like, there's all the stuff about beepers and tasers and an airline phone and a fax. And it's like, it's trying to show he's like, I guess, out of touch, but trying to learn new things. I don't know.
Yeah. And of course it's hilarious now, because all of that stuff was kind of cutting edge at the time. And now you're like, fax machines had their 20-year run and, are long gone. But, at the time, he just spends
the film swearing and kind of being a dick to people. I mean, Dennis Franz kind of deserves it, but then he keeps calling him like a fat fuck and stuff. And even Holly, I feel, is massively disproportionately nasty to Thornburg, who doesn't really do anything to her. He's just like, basically kind of just in the same area, and she's like, "Hey, dick, you got bad breath, dick." And
I didn't understand those sequences. She's talking about how he smells, and I'm like,
"Yeah, why are you just abusing him?"
Well, it's not even funny. It feels like they felt like they had to do something, and she was like, "Well, I'll only do lines that I'm not going to go after any personality stuff or something."
Yeah,
it was just strange. It just felt really juvenile.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. So I remember even like when I saw this, it was actually quite refreshing seeing Die Hard with a Vengeance, where I think it does pull him back to more, probably because John McTiernan directed that as well, more kind of like McClane worrying about the public first, which in the last couple of Die Hard movies, I think in Die Hard 5, he's actually driving over vehicles on the road. Like, I guess he doesn't care about people anymore. But that was the whole thing in the early films. It was like, McClane would rather save lives than win, even.
Yeah.
You know, he was very worried about the public. He was a good policeman. But in this, he's like kind of slimy. He's slimy, you know? He's a bit of a creep, really. And, you know, and it's silly as well. Like the fight in the airport luggage area is kind of stupid. I mean, it's kind of entertaining again, but it's stupid. It's like he jumps on the bike because that's faster than just running after the guy. Not really.
Well, and then he kills a guy with something that I'm like, what is that even supposed to be? Like, what would you possibly have in a luggage area that would be crushing suitcases? Like, what? I was like, so baffled by what had killed that guy.
It's like Boyd from Temple of Doom. It's like what Pat Roach gets stuck in. That rock crusher.
Right. I was absolutely just like, that was when the movie started losing me. I was like, wait, what are they doing and why? And why? He is an LA cop at this point. So he really doesn't have any jurisdiction doing anything he's doing. And he does kill people and everyone treats it like, oh, yeah, you spilled ink or something. Like they just don't care that he like straight up basically murdered people.
I mean, at least they do kind of like lock him out of meetings and stuff, which I kind of like because
yeah, that guy would have been in handcuffs and sitting in a cell. There's absolutely none of that. What I mean, him walking around business would not have occurred. They wouldn't have been like, go pick up your wife at the gate and get out of here.
Well, at the end of both films, they drive off, and I'm like, they wouldn't drive off. They wouldn't be allowed to drive off.
Oh, we were laughing at the end of Die Hard because this is the first time it really hit me that I was like, he's been shot like 3 times.
Yeah,
and he's going home to have sex with his wife.
He die
from he's going to die on top of her. Like this is going to be bad.
Well, I feel like the second one was even worse because like Marvin, who's supposed to be like an Al surrogate, but he's just a creepy, useless guy.
Yeah, I didn't get that at all.
Turns up in his golf buggy and he goes, "Bring the missus. Hey, it's going to be a great Christmas." And I'm like, he's just blown up a plane. He's just like, I mean, surely he has to fill out some forms at least, you know.
Well, she also is not fazed by the fact she has no idea. She's been on an airplane for the past 2 hours. All she knows is that she finally landed.
Yeah.
And she gets off and her husband is again covered in blood. And she's like, why does this keep happening to us? I'd be like, why are you covered in blood, my beloved?
Well, I guess maybe she heard some of Thornburg's thing because he was like broadcasting, wasn't he, from her plane?
Yeah, but they didn't really know what was going on. Like they certainly didn't know John McClane was like shooting up terrorists. I mean, Holly probably could have guessed, I guess, at that point. But
well, links to the first film, I guess there is some meta stuff where he does say, "I'm ass deep in terrorists again this Christmas" and stuff. And there's a nice little touch which I did like where you see it very briefly for like a second, but Holly's looking through a folder with Nakatomi on, so she obviously still works for them.
Someone's got to run that place at that point. Everyone else is
dead. Half people are dead or burned badly. But yeah, so what did you think of? So the end of Die Hard is actually quite small, really. It's just a face-off between Rickman, a Western face-off, I guess, between Rickman and and John doing his Roy Rogers. But what do you think about that? I actually quite like the end of Die Hard 2, even though it's very stupid. Could that happen? Could you do that?
Could you blow up an airplane? No, of course not. I mean, because the flame follows in a straight line the fuel that's coming out. The fuel would be dispersing, it would be aerosoling as it would be hitting the air. I don't know, and they do it this like as if there's a line of
jump through the air. It wouldn't jump through the air.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, I'm not in any way an expert there, but Jamie asked the same question. She's like, "Wait, what just happened?" I was like, "I think they said the flame went from the ground through the air in a straight line to the airplane." But I mean, she did ask, and I said, "Look, gas. The reason they use gas for movies." For explosions is because it does explode in such a dramatic way, and this is jet fuel, so how I really don't know. But them then having planes use that as like, oh yeah, use that as the light to come in and land. they don't know what debris is all over the place at that point, including human bodies. I was like, they would never have told people to land on that strip.
Yeah, because there'd be bits of plane all over the place.
And people, the other thing that doesn't make any sense is, why are there no vehicles like fire trucks? Like if you go to an airport and you look across the tarmac, there are vehicles, support vehicles everywhere, none of which you ever see in this movie. It's like, it doesn't matter that they turned off the lights. You'd line up a whole bunch of trucks along the runway. And
they kind of say the terrorists are going to shoot at anything they put out there. But then I don't see how that would work, because they'd have to be quite close.
Yeah, you'd be able to go find the terrorists immediately then.
Yeah. The old church seemed very convenient as well. I love the janitor who goes like, they're closing the old church. It's going to be like a part of me dies with it. He goes, that's true. And then just shoots him. And I'm like, see that coming a mile away. Can you hear it?
Well, also, Dulles is not in the middle of the country. Like, it's not in the heart of DC the way like Reagan is, but it's always, in that point, it was built up around there. The DC area is big and sprawling. And I mean, I flew in and out of Dulles a few times a couple of years ago, and every time I think of Dulles, I think of this movie. But it's well, they shot all that stuff, I think, in Michigan, and like that was all the countryside, and Michigan has plenty of beautiful winter countryside. But around Dulles, I mean, you're not going to have a foot of snow. You're in Virginia. You're not in like Maine. So yeah, all of that was kind of crazy. It's just a lot of nonsense. The whole movie is predicated on nobody knowing how anything works, which is kind of like, at least the first Die Hard is like, well, you know what an elevator shaft is, and you kind of know there's air vents and stuff, and maybe this would kind of work. This one is just like, screw you, you're ignorant, you don't know how anything works, so we're just going to make a movie counting on the fact that you don't know.
Got the guy from Star Trek flying the English Windsor plane. That
Colm Meaney.
Yeah. That was kind of amusing for me, because I'm like, oh, here we go, English accents, dodgy English accents.
Yeah, he's Irish.
We like right? British rail, love. We get you there eventually.
Well, that plane was clearly not a transatlantic plane. Like, they just grabbed any old airplane set that they could, and were like, it looked like something that you'd use to fly between here and like Dallas. They're not 6 seats apart when you're flying, from DC to London.
So what did you think of the deaths? Because in Die Hard, there was quite a lot of shooting people in the knees and legs, which was quite nasty. But I feel like, again, in Die Hard 2, they took it up a couple of more notches of nastiness with the icicle in the eye and stuff for no reason, really.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about it, I was kind of paying attention to other stuff, but
I quite like the young soldier who transferred.
Yeah,
unfortunately for him, at last minute to this squad. I thought that was quite good.
Yeah, there was that. There was the thing where Bruce Willis knocks over which didn't buy, but knocks over the.
Well, squashes Robert Patrick, actually.
Yeah. What's the scaffolding? Knocks over the scaffolding. And that was crazy too. That it was like, there's baby John Leguizamo, there's baby Robert Patrick.
Yeah.
Which I haven't watched this movie in so long. I had no idea they were in it. Even William Sadler being in
T2, I guess, about a year before T2.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I did like the kind of, although very stupid again, but I like the walkway, where his gun's down the walkway. But the guy who does run towards him is like, just shoot him from where you are. Don't let him get the gun.
I understood. I mean, that felt very Die Hard to me, where he was like, I've got to hit the button and have the gun roll towards me. And, the bad guys realizing things are, about to get out of control and all that. But yeah, it was like, just guns are distance weapons. Just start firing from where you're at. You're in a straight line between yourself and him. I didn't understand the choreography on that, or the blocking.
I obviously love Die Hard. I'm going to be honest. I quite like Die Hard too. One thing that does unsettle me, not upset me, but unsettle me every time I watch these, though, is Bruce Willis's what he thinks are obviously very cool, witty lines, which in Die Hard is when he calls for the fire trucks. Come to Papa, I'm going to kiss your Dalmatian. Okay.
That's a common phrase, Simon.
And then later on, when he's fighting Carl, I'm going to cook you and eat you. But I think it kind of gets worse in Die Hard 2, because in Die Hard 2, it's can't find it now. I think what sets off the metal detector first? The letting your ass or the shitting your brains? It doesn't even make sense.
That line was bad and made no sense. Yes.
Yeah. And I feel like that is Bruce Willis. I feel like he's the one that put those in the script and said these are great.
I think you're probably right. You kind of mentioned Dennis Franz, and we kind of skipped over
playing Dennis Franz again.
Dear God, that poor dude. Yeah, Jamie asked if he'd ever played anything but a cop. I said yes. He is in what was the noir I just watched?
The Burr Young Effect.
Yeah, he plays Brian De Palma in a Brian De Palma movie. I'm trying to remember what the name of it is.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he basically he's not actually Brian De Palma, but he's very clearly supposed to be Brian De Palma. And
it's not Crimes of Passion or something, isn't it?
No, it was the I just watched it. I don't know. But he's terrible in this. this movie,
he just doesn't listen. Like, way more than necessary. He doesn't listen to anything useful for a long time.
That guy never would have been promoted. All he does is scream at his bosses. He screams at his subordinates. He screams at Bruce Willis. And it's like you would not be screaming at Fred Thompson in this movie.
I'll tell you who acts worse than that, though. Actually, Bruce Willis, because John McClane obviously is supposed to be very, very professional cop to a certain extent. I mean, obviously he goes outside of the rules to get the job done, but the bit that really gets me is like he goes like they're using like blanks, and Dennis Franz is like, what? And he goes like, look, and he just shoots at him in a fully manned police station. And I'm like, they'll kill him. Kill him.
He would have been dead or in cuffs or both.
Yeah. It's like you don't do that.
Yeah. But that was in the trailer, I think.
Okay. Well, that's a stupid trailer because that gives away major plot points.
Yeah, I think you couldn't figure out what was going on from the trailer at that point or something. But yeah, okay. I just don't think Die Hard 2 is a very good movie. I mean, and I remember thinking that when I was like 15 or whatever, when I saw it of like Die Hard, we'd all loved, we'd all watched already like 10 times.
Yeah.
And excited for Die Hard 2. And I was like, the logistics of this, at the time, I was just kind of like, I don't think this is as good as Die Hard. And I was, whatever, it's a sequel, that happens.
Yeah.
And then like later rewatching it, it's all the logistics of the thing that I'm like, no one put any effort into this movie. Like,
it's a lot of, was it fury, the sound of fury in the face of, facts, really, isn't it? It's like, yeah. I mean, it's like if we turn up to 11, they won't notice the massive plot holes, hopefully.
Yeah. And I think that there were, fair point. I think in the 80s that happened a lot. I do think that there's a weird sociological thing that happened out of, you talked about any of us feel like we could be John McClane. I think that that's actually a problem.
Yeah.
I think it's how you end up with people thinking that they need to carry a handgun every time they go to 7-Eleven or whatever. And, I think movies like this are somewhat indirectly responsible for everyone thinking that they're going to be John McClane when, the shit hits the fan.
I mean, definitely, I think the switch from, the Stallones and the Schwarzenegger vehicles to this and Lethal Weapon, and a lot of those, normal guys kind of like, on a mission. I mean, because I mean, like in this already by the second film here, like you said earlier, the vulnerabilities are kind of being ironed out. McClane doesn't really have that many, like, he doesn't question himself. he's actually going around going, look, you need to do this to everybody else. Whereas in Die Hard, he didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
He was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do?
Yeah. How do I get the other cops here so I don't have to deal with this, is what he does for the first part of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And at least in Die Hard with a Vengeance, they kind of went back to that, thankfully, which I think is a step up from Die. I don't think it's as good as the original Die Hard, but I think it's definitely a step or two up from this one. Where, Die Hard with a Vengeance, I'm sure you've seen it loads. We should do a podcast on that sometime. But, he starts off with a hangover on suspension, and he doesn't want to be doing any of it. He spends the entire film arguing.
I'll be honest, I've only seen Die Hard with a Vengeance twice, and not since the 90s. And I have never seen anything beyond that as far as Die Hard goes. So.
I would say we have to remedy the first points, keep the second points. That's good.
Fair enough. But yeah, I mean, I still enjoy these movies, but I do think that, there's something. I will also say, however, as much as I'll bag on Die Hard 2, and I know I've talked about it before, you guys are going to all think I have like PTSD from it. I don't, but we had an active shooter once in one of my buildings when I was working, and I was not in the building when it happened. I was supposed to be heading off to another university. Yeah. But I kept thinking about McClane's beeper going off when Holly calls him, and he's about to, and I was like, I'm really afraid to call my people to see if they're okay and to tell them to get out of the building, because I kept thinking about that sequence in Die Hard 2.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they were all fine. But it genuinely was like, I don't want to give away someone's position because they didn't think to turn off their phone.
Yeah.
At this time. And so, yeah, I mean, say what you will about Die Hard 2, but at least it gave me that.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's kind of a cookie cutter copy of the first one, but with all the subtleties ironed out, I think, and everything turned up to 11. It was a huge hit, and and it is, I think it's strong enough to carry on the franchise. It's not a franchise killer, definitely. I enjoyed watching it last night, but I also rolled my eyes quite a few times compared to the first movie. I think, I remember like a couple of years ago, I think the Alamo did a double bill at Christmas of both, and I missed it for some reason because I was working. And I think last night is the first time I've ever done a double bill, and I felt very much the same as when we did Halloween 2.
Yeah,
I felt like you can watch this after Halloween, but do you really need to? Yeah. And it's also like, the peak of Hollywood action excess, which I feel like Predator 2 was kind of similar, where it's like, you got to have Bill Paxton in there, and you've got to have a bunch of other people. You've got to have Lance Henriksen hanging around, and Robert Davi, and they've all got to say motherfucker every other word. And shit blows up, and, women are sex objects. And it's just like the height of the end of that 80s boom, really, before the Matrix came in and, everything went a different direction.
Yeah. I mean, I have a feeling like, we'll never know how much cocaine actually impacted like how much these movies are getting made, but they're an interesting cultural touchstone, because you're absolutely right about, kind of how, but then you have a character like Holly in it. So that in their head, they know that that's like, we could be doing something interesting, but then they have her say lines like, you smell bad. And it's like, come on.
Compared to the first film, where she's actually like, she kind of knows what's going on and she's doing some things to try to help. And, like when she says to like, her boss, don't go forward. Don't show yourself,
Yeah. I think if they left Bonnie Bedelia alone for 5 minutes, she could have come up with much better dialogue, but she was, clearly, I read a little interview with her in preparation for this. Is the only preparation I did. And she, this is not what she does. She did this completely for the money. It was interesting because she was actually a little frustrated that she hadn't been seen as a sex object in the 80s. She's like, she basically was like, it was women with tiny waists and big busts, both of which I have. I don't know why I didn't get to ride that train, basically. Yeah. But she wants to do art movies and stuff, and ended up doing a lot of TV movies because she found the subject material of like, you can't kidnap my daughter, that kind of stuff way more fulfilling than she's like, the Die Hard movies were nonsense. I knew it when I was making them, but it was a paycheck, and it increased my profile and all of that.
Well, this definitely shored up Bruce Willis as an action star, and unfortunately, I think also inflated his ego, so that the next thing he did after this was Hudson Hawk, where he came down with a bit of a bump, and actually took him about 5 years to Die Hard 3, Die Hard with a Vengeance, to kind of recover his clout a bit, because he kind of went up his own ass a bit after this, which I think you can see in the film. I think you really can see that very subtle sideways shift from McClane as a likable, wisecracking, kind of, I don't know, policeman trying to do his job, to like a more arrogant, egotistical individual. So yeah, interesting, very interesting to see, the same character through two different prisms.
Yeah, I mean, as an actor, he was doing stuff like Color of Night. He did Bonfire of the Vanities. Like, he was trying to do a lot of stuff between Die Hard 2 and Die Hard with a Vengeance. And he really seemed to hit his groove again with The Fifth Element.
Pulp Fiction,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, like he did like Color of Night, and it's like he's showing his dick in a movie. And I'm like, man, the ego, you got to be confidence to put that up, on a 40-foot screen. But he, he's kind of gone, as you said earlier, like he just kind of got boring at some point. Yeah, and I haven't seen a Bruce Willis movie in probably 15 years, but
he did do Glass, didn't he? That's probably the biggest thing he's done lately. But apart from that, I feel like he just goes and shoots all these. Well, I mean, you would have called them previously straight to DVD, but I guess these days it's straight to streaming movies, where he just churns them out. Nobody ever knows about them or hears about them. I don't know who watches them.
Yeah.
And he just, I mean, kind of Harrison Ford did the same thing a little bit to a lesser extent. He seemed to just like physically looked incredibly bored and fed up for about 10 years on screen. And thankfully, Harrison Ford pulled out of that. But I feel like, I hope one day Bruce Willis will.
I think I will never know how much Callista Flockhart was good for Harrison Ford. And I totally mean that sincerely. Like, I feel like that's when he started doing fun stuff again. Like, I thought it was really weird. He like ran off with her. But at the same time, that's when he started seeming to have a little joie de vivre again. And maybe Bruce Willis needs to find his own Callista Flockhart, but I don't know.
After this, I know you haven't seen them, so I guess briefly I can say we're Die Hard with a Vengeance after this, which I do recommend. We should definitely do a podcast on that. That's great fun. Added Samuel Jackson, never hurts. And then there was a big gap for 12 years until 2007's Live Free or Die Hard, or my preferred title, Die Hard 4.0, which the rest of the world knew it as.
Never heard that. Okay.
Which kind of makes more sense because it's all about computer hacking.
Okay.
We're breaking through the firewall again.
Enhance.
So, and that wasn't bad, although it was a little bit hobbled by its PG-13 certificate. Bruce looked good, though. Bruce definitely held it together. Justin Long was a lot less annoying than you'd think as a sidekick.
He was a huge part of why I avoided it. Okay.
Problem was Timothy Olyphant, very bland villain, and don't even go with the hench people. They didn't even register really. I think Maggie Q might have been a henchwoman, and that was about it. But probably worth a look. And then Die Hard 5, oh dear, or A Good Day to Die Hard in 2013. That's where the wheels really did. If the wheels were wobbling on part 4, they fell off on part 5. That was horrible. It looked like somebody made it in their weekend. And about the only thing left was Bruce. And he wasn't trying that hard. So, Jay Courtney pops up as his son, was the kiss of death for about 5 years and everything. And I can't even remember the villain. I remember not even knowing who the villain was when I watched it. Which isn't a good point. But it's kind of like what John McClane did on his holiday, because I think he goes to Russia.
Oh God. Okay.
So it's a bit like the Police Academy 6 of the Die Hard series.
The legacy of Die Hard itself is absolutely gigantic, and like, I don't know if you ever watched the NBC sitcom. It was originally on Fox, and then it moved over to NBC, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But the main character, who's played by Andy Samberg, his entire life was dictated by the fact that he loved Die Hard as a kid, and so that's why he was a cop. And there was various things, like they had a Christmas episode where they got trapped in a store with criminals, and he's like, oh, "We're Die Harding!" Like, he was so excited. There's like bullets whizzing around. And then they actually went to LA in an episode, and the whole thing got derailed because they spotted Nakatomi Tower and wanted to actually go up in it while they were there. So
that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, you're right, though. We had Under Siege, didn't we? And we had Speed.
Mm-hmm.
And we had, I guess, Air Force One later on.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a bunch of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea of it's not a closed room mystery, but a closed room action movie. And the idea of being in this skyscraper, no kid who saw this movie ever walked into a skyscraper or a large building and didn't think about, like, okay,
oh yeah,
where's my exit points, as they were, wandering around afterward.
Yeah. And the first film does it so well, like him stopping the fans to get through them, and like that bit where Cole's still searching for him, Alan Rickman's going, come back,
Mm-hmm.
and he shoots up the air conditioning unit and it just misses Bruce Willis. He's like looking at the bullet hole right in front of him. It's fantastic.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it would be interesting to see. I think we're too close to it still. But another 10 years, you could do a remake of Die Hard. It would be really interesting, because now you'd have cell phones.
Yeah.
What would that mean? How would the terror, the robbers deal with it? What would they actually be going after? Because I don't think they actually do bearer bonds anymore. So there's definitely some things that are tied to the era of, like, once the two German brothers, reroute the phone lines, everything, that's it for communication, which would be very hard for people today to understand.
Well, they'd have to have some kind of like signal blocker, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Where nobody can get a signal.
Yeah. So I'd be curious to see how you redo this now. Less curious how you do Die Hard too.
It's like Home Alone if you had like a cell phone, but like over in about 5 seconds.
Well, so there's a new, to talk about the legacy. I mean, Home Alone, right? But yeah, Home Alone had a sequel come out this Christmas.
I have seen the trailer, and the kid is this appalling British kid. And I'm like, that's the most racist thing I've ever seen. This kid's horrible.
Well, we all think that there's nothing worse than British people on Christmas.
Small British people. But apparently he's a total dick in it. And the robbers are actually quite sympathetic, because the robbers are trying to get like something for their kid that the main kid stole. And it's like, they're just kind of saying whoever wrote this just didn't get Home Alone at all. And it's just a child torturing two adults, basically.
We can maybe do Home Alone next year. I don't actually think it's a good movie, so that would be my controversial stance. But
we could do Home Alone and Home Alone 2 Lost in New York. There you go. That's all you need. Oh, forget the other 7 that came after them. Malcolm McDowell degrading himself.
Did he really? Oh God. Oh man.
I'll do anything for money.
Malcolm's got a mortgage.
I can't keep talking about Clockwork Orange. Or pay the bills.
Anyway, we have gone for like an hour and a half, so I feel like we need to let people go.
We should say Merry Christmas then.
Okay. Merry Christmas and a Bonnie Bedelia New Year to everybody.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfuckers.
Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. And since we've no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. It doesn't show signs of stopping, and I brought some corn for popping. The lights are turned way down low. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. When we finally...
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.